In this video, we're going to talk about survey design and how to implement a survey instrument. And up to this point, we've been talking primarily about preference formation and the sources of political beliefs in the context of public opinion and how citizens form those opinions. And we've covered a bunch of different perspectives, some that suggest some of those opinions aren't really representative of true beliefs, that they are nothing more than random, and others that maybe, Zeller, for instance, that says, maybe people are doing the best they can. We're at least on average getting a sense of their feelings at a point in time. Now we have to actually focus on the instrument we use to elicit those responses, because that can be another source of a potential error. And conducting surveys, the physical conducting of surveys, has some pitfalls with it. It's sort of the other half of survey research. We know that it's complicated in terms of people's beliefs and how they express them and what we're actually getting at when we interview them, but the survey tool itself can be prone to some different types of error. And these are called the 4 types of survey error. Sometimes, framing them in the positive, they're considered the 4 cornerstones of survey research. And what we're talking about is, when you're conducting a survey, you want coverage of your population. You want to make sure that you are surveying people that are in your population. For example, if it's registered voters, you want to know that your survey is covering all of the registered voters. The sampling. Are you getting a truly random and representative sample, or is your sample skewed in one way or the other? Oftentimes in surveys, potentially that Reader's Digest or Literary Digest poll, the famous example of a poll gone wrong, could have been some sampling problems with that. You don't know that the sample you're getting is truly representative of the overall population. And there's some measurement error. Are you actually measuring the thing that you think you are? And in last week's readings on ideology, that's sort of an underlying thread that tied some of them together, was the fact that we're looking at these constructs called ideology or partisanship, and we're really measuring them. That's just a battery of survey questions that we're assuming is representative of ideology. And so there are a lot of measurement problems endemic to that. And then the responses. Are people giving us responses that are accurate? Do they remember accurately? Are they able to formulate response to complex questions? So all of those things together are what we consider the 4 sources of error. And in an approach known as the total survey error approach, what you want to do is try and do the best you can to minimize all of them. There are inevitably trade-offs in survey research. So you can you can cover your whole population, but you may be incurring a high cost in doing so, or it may take a lot of time to get there in terms of response rates. You can get a high response rate, but it may take you a lot of time to get there. And then again, cost is a factor. So all of these things, you can focus on a specific type of error and you can work to mitigate it, but you might be trading something off. And that's kind of a general theme of this, is trade-offs. You can't do everything, but you can try and minimize the damage you do. In terms of an overall process for conducting surveys, there's a few steps, and there's quite a bit of lead time in this process. It takes a while. One, you want to determine your population. Who is it that you're trying to survey? Is it registered voters? Is it likely voters? What is the group that you're after? Within that, you want to draw a sample, and from that you need a sample frame. So what is your sample frame? A lot of public opinion polls are conducted using telephone, random digit dialing. So the sample frame is a collection, a 100 block as they call them, of random telephone digits. So who are you studying? Who's your population? What is a list, the sample frame that you're going to pull your sample from? Then you got to determine your mode. This is the method. Is it going to be a telephone survey, in person, or web survey? And that's what we're focusing on. That's what we are going to put together in this class, is a web survey. And so that leads to another question. What's your survey tool? You can use SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. We're going to use Qualtrics. What you choose is going to impact other elements of your survey. If a web survey may rule out some people, it may be cause some sampling error. Just like if you decide that your mode is going to be a landline telephone survey, again, that's going to cause some sampling error. Recruitment, how are you going to get these people to participate? This is a challenge. It's a challenge to get people to complete surveys. Response rate of 30%, pretty good. You take that. In terms of web surveys that are advertised through sort of maybe Facebook or other electronic means of promoting a survey, the click-through rate on those is incredibly low. We're looking at about 1% conversions. So that's tough to actually get people to complete surveys. Once you get them, are you going to keep them? Are they going to drop out? And this leads into question design. Can you design questions that ensure people complete the survey? And then you want accuracy as well. You want questions that are going to elicit accurate responses. People feel comfortable asking. People can cognitively process a response to them. Before we implement, you've got the ethics review process. We're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks. Submitting your idea through an ethics review board, and then getting the green light to go ahead with your survey, and finally administering the questionnaire. So it's a lot of steps, a lot of lead time. It's not something you just whip together overnight. I want to show you an example of a recruitment strategy, and this is a good place to start. And this is an email I get every year. I get it on my birthday. I got this sent to me a couple weeks ago, and it is a textbook example of a technique that is an effective technique for getting people to complete surveys. Now, we just off the top of your head, you've probably seen some examples of financial inducements. You know, people offering you some money to complete a survey, or you survey, you'll get your name entered in for a gift card, things of that nature. That's one way of creating a financial exchange in order to get survey responses. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. And there's kind of a sweet spot. Around $2 tends to be the right financial incentive to get people to complete a survey, or the equivalent of roughly a Tim Hortons coffee. Less than that, you don't get a lot of traction, and over that, too much, for some reason, doesn't really work. Well, one, it's too costly to implement, and then people almost get suspicious. So around $2 is a sweet spot. But this is a different type of exchange that that this recruitment email is undertaking, and I'll just walk you through it. In honor of my birthday, they want to wish me the best. Hope I'm able to do something I like. This is a firm I do business with, so they're following up. Because they value my opinion so highly, they want me to take a few moments to complete a survey for them. It'll help me better understand my needs since we last spoke or met. They are creating something called social exchange here. This is the principle here. They're trying to get me to buy into this, that I feel a need to respond to them. So you can see right from the beginning, they've started. They've complimented me. They've said happy birthday. They're conveying their good wishes to me, and because they value my opinion, they want me to share my thoughts. So they're trying to create a social debt here. They're complimenting me. They're doing me a favor. Can I do them a favor? Can I return the favor and complete the survey? That is called social exchange. Does a great job of doing that in the first two paragraphs. Pardon me. We go on to demonstrate our appreciation of my valuable time, again using you language. So they're focusing on me, the customer here. We'll donate $2 to the food bank for each completed survey. How could I say no to that? I mean, $2, they're hitting the sweet spot. That's not an accident, and it's not a gift to me. It's a gift to someone else for charity. So by not completing this survey, I'm taking money away from the food bank. And then I've got the direct financial incentive for $100 at a restaurant gift card. $100, that's a meaningful amount. I could have a good time at a restaurant with $100. Thank you for being a valued client to continue to earn and protect my trust in them. Textbook example of creating social exchange. And this is what you want to do. You want to avoid, if you're a researcher saying, I need your help for my research, no, not going to work. You will perhaps notice in the past, maybe you've gotten user experience surveys, and they will say, help us serve you better. That's an attempt at creating social exchange. There is something in it for the respondent to complete this survey. And so this is a great example of how you want to structure your recruitment. Can you make it seem like the respondent has a vested interest in completing the survey? And what sort of financial inducements might be appropriate, if at all? In this case, a draw for a gift card, significant amount, and then the $2 to charity is a great, again, it's the sweet spot in terms of dollar amount, but it's also working to create that that social exchange. So this is the type of thing that you can do to facilitate recruitment. It's tough to get people to complete surveys. Also, once you get them, tough to keep them in the survey. Some research here by Eisenbach identifies what they call a sort of life cycle of survey attrition, where you start with 100% of the participants, and these are the people you convert. So maybe that's 30% of the people that you engage. They start, they're curious about the survey, they're into it, and at a certain point you will notice a significant drop-off. This is the phase, they label it the attrition phase, where people decide, I'm out of here, I don't like this survey. And then you're left with their stable use phase here, the hardcore users that would likely complete any survey, but they're the ones that stick with you. So this is they've got a curiosity plateau, an attrition phase, and a stable use phase. You want to avoid that chunk in the middle. How do you get people after that initial phase of curiosity? How do you keep them with you and prevent them from dropping out? And that's a challenge. One of the ways you can do that is by structuring the question order appropriately. Oftentimes, people are tempted to put demographic identification questions at the very beginning. Your name, your age, your income, your occupation, all that kind of stuff. That's boring. You put it at the beginning, people are going to drop off. You want to put that stuff at the end because that's where you've already got people to complete the survey. They vested that much time. Then you can hit them with the demographic information. The first questions should be directly related to your construct, and they should be engaging and interesting so that the participant, again, it feels like they want to keep going in the survey. Things like progress bars can help for survey attrition. They can help if it's a shorter survey. A progress bar will make it feel like they're pacing through quickly, as they can see that move from 25 to 50 to up to 100%, and they can see a light at the end of the tunnel. If it's an incredibly long survey, a progress bar may not work so well. In fact, it could have the opposite effect. People complete a survey for 5 minutes and they say that they've only completed 10% of it. They're out of there. So this is a challenge. How do you structure your questions? How do you structure the overall flow of the survey to prevent people from dropping out? And finally, last point in this section is the response process. And when people are completing the survey, so you've made your recruitment effort, you've got the conversion, you're keeping them in the survey. What's going on in terms of processing? Well, these steps, there's an entire domain, subfield really, of psychology devoted to the cognitive processing of survey instruments. So we have a lot of insight from their research, and they do things like eye tracking to follow eye movements on the screen and heat maps. So they have a pretty good idea of what's happening in terms of processing. But people look at a question, they comprehend it, they retrieve it, they make a judgment, and then they respond. It sounds a lot like Zala. It sounds a lot like the RAS model. You've got to understand the question, ideally as the researcher intends it to be. Go find that information. Maybe that's a function of the most recent thing you heard. Again, echoes of Zahler. You make a judgment and then you respond. You turn that relevant information into the response on the form, or in the case, as the case may be, in an interview. The number one, the perception is what's different. 2 to 5 sort of echoes Zahler in the RAS model. The perception is incredibly important. Now, in an in-person interview, the interviewer will have an impact on the responses. There's satisficing, there's social desirability bias, there's lots of things that happen. On a web survey, perception can be influenced by the display that's used. So by the survey tool, the type of question, the graphic interface, the way it's laid out on the screen, how it formats on a mobile device, all of those things feed into this process, because if they're not, if the perception is somehow impeded, then comprehension will be off and the whole process suffers. If respondents have difficulty with the perception, if it's something that doesn't display, or it's just not laid out, it's not pleasing to the eye, or the eye doesn't naturally follow to the to the question stem, to the response options, you're going to get attrition. You're going to get response error, measurement error, because people aren't going to answer the questions correctly. So the way the response is laid out, the way questions are constructed, the way the responses are ordered, the way things are laid out on the page, all of those are a factor in the responses for web-based surveys. And so that's an area where we're going to turn next, because we need to be mindful of how we order the questions in our survey and how those questions are actually displayed, because then they can sort of interrupt some of these steps in terms of the response process. That's the area we're going to turn to next.